Hey everybody. So we have a trade to talk about that took place last night, and actually it happened while I was streaming during the Blues and Bruins game. So we got to talk about a little bit about it last night during the stream, but I do want to do a full in-depth video on it because it is a pretty big trade, and it's between the Winnipeg Jets and the Philadelphia Flyers. The Winnipeg Jets have sent Kevin Hayes, a pending UFA, to Philadelphia in exchange for a fifth-round draft pick. And I want to look at this deal from both sides and really go into it, starting with Winnipeg here, because a lot of people's first reaction is that, wow, you only got a fifth-round pick in return for Kevin Hayes. That is a huge disparity in value there. Well, when you look at it, Kevin Hayes has the option of hitting free agency on July 1st. And there is no guarantee that he is going to re-sign with wherever Winnipeg traded him to. So Winnipeg was never going to get a real fair value in return for Hayes, because so much of that was dependent on him signing where he got traded to. And if he doesn't do that, then this team literally would have traded for Hayes for absolutely nothing. So they were never going to get as a normal, return for Hayes if he was still under contract. And from the Winnipeg perspective, there was a 0% chance of Kevin Hayes returning to Winnipeg. Winnipeg is already pretty tight up against the cap. They have some of their own guys that they need to re-sign. And the money isn't there. There was no way that the Winnipeg Jets were going to be able to afford to sign Kevin Hayes. So, your options there, if you're the Jets, are you either trade him and get something in return for him, even if it's not a lot, or he walks on July 1st and you get absolutely nothing in return. So it did make sense for Winnipeg to trade him, and at least they got something in return. Now, I am surprised it was only a fifth-round pick. I think, probably for a guy as good as Hayes, you probably should have been able to get at least a third, but it's better than nothing. And from a Philadelphia standpoint, this trade was an absolute no-brainer, because if Hayes doesn't sign with Philadelphia and ends up walking on July 1st, so what? You gave up a fifth-round pick that was likely to turn into a guy that will never see NHL ice, and so what? It means nothing. You took a chance, and it means nothing. If Kevin Hayes does re-sign with Philadelphia, which I think he will, I really think that Hayes, there's a gaping hole there in Philadelphia's lineup in that second line center spot, and Hayes can fill that perfectly. And I really do think that Hayes is going to sign with the Flyers and stay there long term, because when you look at Philadelphia's lineup, Sean Couturier is the top line center. Claude Giroux's been moved to the wing. Couturier is your number one center. But then after him, there's a big hole down the middle of that lineup. And Nolan Patrick, I mean, this takes so much pressure off of Nolan Patrick, because Nolan Patrick was forced to play a top six role last year, and I just don't think he is ready. He is still a young kid developing and growing at the NHL level. Adding Kevin Hayes allows you to put him in the second line center spot, playing with Voracek and Van Riemsdyk. And it allows Patrick to get knocked back to the third line center spot, which is much less pressure, much better for him to grow and develop at his own pace. I think a lot of Philadelphia fans were hoping that Nolan Patrick would be better, more of an NHL star at this point than he is. But some players take longer to develop than others. And Patrick was the second overall pick just a couple of years ago. You can't rush guys like that. And when you throw him into a top six role, all of a sudden that puts a lot of pressure on him. And I think this really will help Nolan Patrick grow as a player at the NHL level, getting moved back down to the third line spot where he can just focus on developing his game. So really, this trade was a huge win for the Philadelphia Flyers. and an absolute no-brainer to take. For Winnipeg, I mean, you're better off getting something in return than nothing. And Hayes was clearly going to walk in free agency. He still could, but I truly think he's going to stay in Philadelphia just because the lineup spot is there for him. I mean, yes, Philly had a very bad season this past year, but when you look at their roster, they're not a bad team. They have Giroux, Couturier, Van Riemsdyk, Voracek, Konechny. They've got Provorov and Gostisbehere on the back end, and Sanheim's a good young defenseman. And, Carter Hart obviously coming up as one of the top up-and-coming young goaltenders in the league. Philly, I feel like, as bad as they were this past year, are maybe only one or two guys away from being one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. They're a few guys away. And I think Kevin Hayes would be a huge addition there because that would give you a great 1-2 punch of Couturier and Hayes down the middle. Patrick drops to the 3. And I mean, maybe if they add another defenseman and then get some depth forwards, all of a sudden Philly goes from being a team that was out of the playoffs by Christmas time to a team that could potentially make a run to the Eastern Conference Finals in a year or two. So I do think that there's potential there, and if I'm Kevin Hayes, I'm like, you know what? Why not sign here? This is a team that does have potential, and this is a team that has tons of cap space. Cap space is not even close to a problem for the Flyers. They have I think $30 million in cap space. There's loads of it. So they can sign pretty much as many people as they want. And, in the roster spot, the lineup spot is there for Kevin Hayes. Hayes is a good player, but he's not a number one. He is not a top-line center. But he's a good number 2, and that's what Philly really needs. They need somebody to come in and grab a hold of that number 2 center spot. I think he could do that very, very well. So the trade makes sense for both sides. I thought Winnipeg would get a little bit more in return for a player as good as Kevin Hayes, but clearly because of the pending UFA status, that really knocked his value down in what they got in return. For Philadelphia, this was an absolute no-brainer. You only give up a 5th-round draft pick, which really doesn't mean a whole lot, and you potentially just traded for your second-line center that could really, really help this team. So we'll see if Hayes signs in Philly. Philadelphia has his rights now up until July 1st when he can leave in free agency if a deal is not done before then. I think a deal will get done before then, and I think Hayes stays in Philly. And we'll take that spot in the lineup and be their second-line center. So we'll see what happens, but certainly a trade worth talking about, and plenty of negotiating in the works ahead for both Kevin Hayes and the Philadelphia Flyers. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Remember, we're on a road to 1,000 subscribers. So every sub counts, every like counts. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.